right, welcome to the continuation of our Mesopotamian talk. We sort of introduced it in the first week, sort of where Mesopotamia was, sort of one of the earliest areas of civilization. Again, along these rivers, two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. We talked about some of the earliest concentration of cities in Sumer, and then ultimately out of that came the first sort of kingdom, Akkadian kingdom. And here we're going to try to sort of look through this Mesopotamian world from about like 2000 BC up to about 500 BC. So, because this is kind of a period where Mesopotamia is going through a list of, first we sort of talk about list of kingdoms that rise and fall there. Again, we're not going to go through, I mean, there's obviously 1500 years of history that we can't cover, obviously, in depth. But we'll sort of paint with some broad strokes about what are these kingdom of Mesopotamia, some names you might have heard about, some events there, and then another big element I want to talk about here is the Mesopotamian trade networks, because really Mesopotamia you get to see sort of connections, early connections within the ancient world, and we'll talk about different products that were coming into Mesopotamia and things that were made from those. We'll look at some of the legacies of Mesopotamia as well here, and then also some Near East societies, particularly focusing on the Phoenicians, who are known for creating the alphabet, which we use today, and also the Hebrews, who came up with, they spoke their own language, Hebrew, but then started their own monotheistic religion, which we know as Judaism. So we'll look at that a little bit. And then to kind of learn a little more about Mesopotamia, we'll look at two primary sources, Hammurabi's Law Codes and Epic of Gilgamesh. That's kind of what we're going to talk about for this week, as we look at Mesopotamia, start moving into a region of the world where we can look at the rise of civilization. So with that, we'll start with kingdoms here. Again, so this is after the Sumerians rose and fell here. So Sumer was down here. They declined. I mean, Sargon, Arcadia, he kind of unified this lower part here, and that sort of sets the stage for how the rest of Mesopotamian sort of history is going to work. Is sort of going to be a back and forth between these groups of Babylon. Babylonia, which is located, their main capital is here in Babylon, which is modern day Baghdad, so it's still a major city, world city here, versus the Assyrians, whose capital is up here in Assur, which is now also Nineveh is in this region. We'll look at that a little bit later, which is in Mosul of Iraq. And really, as we kind of go through this, again, you're not going to need to worry too much about names and dates here. You can refer back to the lecture, but just kind of either Babylon was able to sort of unify this area and take over Assyria, and then other times Assyria will unify. Oh, here's Nineveh up here, would unify these. Sometimes they fight with their neighbors. This is the Hittites. We'll talk about them, which is Turkey. They're modern day Anatolia or Turkey, and they have some interesting history there. Elam is again sort of this early sort of Persian world that exists as well. That there's some back and forth, expansion there. So basically, both these sort of unified at certain times. Rulers would rise up, conquer cities and resources, and really sort of rising and falling over about 1500 years of time. One of the first empires to emerge after the fall of Sargon was the Babylonia. The Babylonians. Here's their capital. Here's Baghdad. Right here along the Euphrates River versus the Tigris River. These two major rivers. Their primary god here of Babylon was Marduk. Every city, as you remember, had a god. So if Marduk was pleased, Baghdad and the Babylonians will do well. So here's just kind of a little map of again, just kind of get familiar with this Mesopotamian geography. Some of the things from that Mesopotamia and the Babylonian kingdoms are known for, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were very famous. They were talked about a lot in a lot of different sources. That the idea here is that they would bring these prized sort of plants and bring them to Babylon, and all the known species of plants were in these palaces, which shows the fertile nature of and the prosperity of Babylon, that they could bring these different plants from all over their kingdoms to thrive in their palaces. Also, the Tower of Babel is very famous, particularly in the Bible. This is where all the languages come from because, yeah, there were a lot of languages circulating around in Babylon: Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, right? So that's famous there. And this is just a picture of what Babylon looks like today. To give you an idea of what this is the walls. This is right outside of modern day Baghdad. So you can get an idea of what this this is in the past, but it's still. I mean, there's still records of it today. Again, just you don't really need to know this in depth with these dates. Just know that sort of this rising and falling. At some points, the Babylonians would be in control. One of the first times this first Babylonian dynasty is really known of Hammurabi Lacos. We'll look at a little bit more. Here's Hammurabi getting the laws passed to him. I talk about this a little bit more later in the Hammurabi lecture. So that's where Hammurabi comes from. So he sort of sets the stage for sort of order within early Babylonian world and Mesopotamian world, because a lot of later kingdoms will borrow and adapt these Hammurabi laws. Fourth Babylonian dynasty, Nebuchadnezzar. So a little bit. There's this interim. The Assyrians come up. We'll talk about that in a little bit, where the Assyrians conquer, and then the Babylonians come up. Nebuchadnezzar is able to regain power with Babylonia. Defeats the Assyrian Elamites. One of his big things is he brought back this statue of Marduk by Elam, which was their neighbor, and regained control of Mesopotamia. And then a little bit later, the sort of latest Babylonian empire that comes up to about 500 BCE by Nebuchadnezzar II, pictured here. He's sort of well known because he is recorded in the Bible and some Jewish, both his records, but as well as outside records of he defeated Jerusalem and he rebuilt Babylon. And he actually deported a lot of the Hebrews into Babylon from out of Jerusalem. So kind of some history within these. The Babylonians rise and fall, rule from Babylon. They're rivals for Mesopotamia. And here's a nice picture. This is the Assyrian Empire from Assyria, which is a little bit north of this. Here's Nineveh up here at Assur, which was original capital, and later up to Nineveh. So the Tigris River, a little bit more north of control. This is the first reign of the Assyrian Empire, which controlled most of Mesopotamia. And the second one, a little bit later, comes here and controls vast swaths of this whole region. Right? So the capital was Ashur originally, then Nineveh. Again, there's a few different phases of kingdoms, which just kind of to get you put some chronology there as well. And we'll talk about the main one here, Ashurbanipal, who we'll talk about in a little more depth. But this is first Assyrian kingdom, again, back to about 2000 BCE. They were rising up kind of the power in the north, around the borders of Babylon. Babylon and Hammurabi was the first ones to gain control. But the Assyrians were there. It's a very famous sort of, we have a lot of, from the palaces, the Assyrian palaces, a lot of the artifacts from then. This is this famous Assyrian tree of life surrounded by these early Assyrian rulers. So the Old Kingdom, Risham founded it at the Temple of Ashur. Middle Kingdom, this is, so the Babylonians were controlled, and the Middle Kingdom is when the Assyrians sort of defeat the Babylonians, expand in Anatolia, and defeat the Hittites. Here's another from the Palace of Nineveh, hunting scenes of them, or I think this is a war scene. They're defeating their neighbors. There's a camel. Here they're chopping off heads and doing all these things. So the Assyrians were very good at expansion. But really, sort of the main one, and the one that I'd like you to remember here a little bit more, is Ashurbanipal, who built this library at Nineveh. It's the capital of Nineveh. Here's a recreation of what Nineveh might have looked like. Here's Ashurbanipal, this is the height of Assyrian power. So this is when he ruled back at that last map, all through Mesopotamia, what is now like sort of the Levant and where Israel is, and he even conquers Egypt as well for a little bit. But what he's known for is he built this huge library, and this is where we get the Epic of Gilgamesh, which we'll talk about a little bit later, because the library was collected, wrote down all of the knowledge of Mesopotamia, dating back to Sargon and Akkadians, and so a lot of this information, and that's why we know so much about Mesopotamia, is because of this library. That it was after the Assyrian Empire collapsed, the library was just left, and because it's a desert there, it was preserved. So the library in Nineveh is very famous. A lot of information of Ashurbanipal. So this the Babylonians, the Assyrians. The last little group here, which I think is important, are the Hittites. They were over here, capital of Hattasu, which is around here. Oh, Hattasu, right here in the middle. So this is Anatolia. Always a very prosperous spot. Again, this dates back. We saw early Neolithic sites are all found throughout here. Again, they have old, middle, new kingdoms kind of up and down as they kind of balance with their nature, with their neighbors. But the big things about contributions of the Hittites to the Mesopotamian world. This is one of the earliest producers of iron, and this is one of the earliest producers of chariots, horses. There's a lot more grazing land up here. Again, Mesopotamia, it's a desert, so you can't really graze horses, but you can import horses. So this is one of the first centers where horses were being bred and domesticated, and then became a very center of trade. And then also the use of horses with chariots was part of this Hittite contribution to Mesopotamian world, but also large part of the ancient world as well. Here's some pictures of the ancient capital here. Here, I think this is interesting. So this is again on the gates of the city. You see these lamasus, so you can kind of see the cultural impacts and trading between Hittites, Babylonians, and Mesopotamia. Here's some more statues we have of them. They're also known for these large hats. So we see a little bit of like material culture of the Hittites, different than Mesopotamia. So they have old, middle, and cool. And then this is the chariots. So they're very known. Early iron production, and iron's important. I'll talk about this in the Bronze Age, Iron Age lecture. That iron allows, one thing you can make with that is wheels and axles, which are a little more last a little longer than just wooden wheels and axles. So with that, you can latch those onto chariots here, where you could stand in front, get pulled by horses, and then go to war. And so you see when you see chariots in the ancient world, the Mesopotamian and Egypt, they were derived from the Hittites. Another thing about the Hittites, and this will come in a little later, is they spoke a little bit different language. They spoke an Indo-European language. We have a little bit of writing left over from them. I think they wrote in cuneiform, but they adapted it to suit their language. But this Indo-European language will come in, and we'll talk about it a little bit more and why that's significant. But so the Hittites were the third sort of group that are in this sort of Mesopotamian world.